When thrusting players into the role of the Arbiter in Halo 2, Bungie set out to tell a story of political intrigue and betrayal. Throughout Halo CE, there were hints at the Covenant's ideology, but much of the game was simply mowing through waves of the colorful aliens without much thought. Halo 2 decided to flip the narrative in more ways than one, with an exploration of the ideology and one character's awakening to the truth behind his faith. The Arbiter would go on to break the Covenant he once swore to uphold, a path made all the more ironic when you look back at his very first mission as Arbiter. When sent after the leader of a group of heretics, Sesa Refumee, we see the start of the Arbiter's deconversion from the Covenant faith. Even so early in the game, for the briefest of moments, it seems like the Arbiter is having doubts. But then the Heretic Leader shoots him. For years, people have asked, why? Why did Sesa shoot? Why didn't he try to persuade the Arbiter of the truth? Some even accuse the scene of making no sense. Today, I'd like to explore these questions and justify Sesa's decision, and we'll be doing so from two perspectives. First, we'll examine things within the context of classic Halo 2 alone, looking exclusively at information presented to us in the game. Then second, we'll look at how the Halo 2 Anniversary terminals added new context to Sesa's motivations. Sesa Refumee started as the leader of an artifact recovery team dispatched to the Threshold gas mine during the events of Halo CE. This we learned from Halo the Flood's 2010 adjunct section. After the destruction of Installation 04, Halo CE's after credits cutscene shows us that 343 Guilty Spark survived, and from Halo 2 we can see that he headed straight for the aforementioned gas mine, where he began a dialogue with the future Heretic Leader. After learning the truth of the Halo rings, Sesa's artifact hunter team fully defected from the Covenant and began broadcasting messages to their fellow Sangheili. When former Supreme Commander Thel 'Vadamee was stripped of his rank and title and branded a heretic himself, his one hope for redemption was as Arbiter.
The will of the prophets.
And upon accepting the role, his first task was to silence Sesa and his heretics. Deployed to the gas mine, Thel would chase Sesa across the station until finally confronting him in a hangar bay, where Thel killed the heretic. But before that, Thel was confronted by Sesa's claims that the Covenant was a lie and that the prophets would lead them all to slaughter. When asking where these words came from, an oracle, 343 Guilty Spark, appeared. For a moment it seemed as though Thel might be open to reason, but then Sesa shoots and their battle begins. So, why did Sesa shoot? Looking only at Halo 2 as it was originally presented, there are three factors to consider. First, a single conversation isn't going to break anyone's faith. Sure, maybe Thel would have been open to hearing what 343 Guilty Spark had to say, but it was going to take more than one conversation to really convert his way of thinking. People don't lose faith overnight, especially when that ideology has been the foundation for their entire life. And that would only be further complicated by Thel recently becoming Arbiter, seeking redemption after being branded a heretic. Now, when discussing this online, I'll occasionally see people bring up something along the lines of, why didn't Sesa bring Thel with him? Which brings me to point 2. Sesa's escape plan at this point was a Seraph Fighter, a craft that can only fit one occupant. Now technically we didn't know that back in the Halo 2 days, but simply looking at the craft, one can see that it would be cramped at best. And even if it did somehow have room for both Sesa and Thel, I again have to circle back to point 1 about Thel's mind not being ready to deconvert, and certainly not ready to run away on the off chance this heretic was speaking truthfully. And third, we have to remember that the gas mine that Thel and Sesa were on, by the time of this confrontation, was free falling into Threshold, a planet more than 50% again the size of Jupiter.
The cable. I'm going to cut it.
The first cutscene for the whole Heretic section of Halo 2 makes it pretty clear that the Covenant's technology can fly quite effectively through the high gravity and winds of the gas giant, and a Forerunner facility would certainly be able to take even stronger forces than anything Covenant made. Nevertheless, there would be a point where even if the station was intact, Covenant technology wouldn't be able to escape the gravity or survive the pressures of Threshold. That might be less of a problem for Thel, given that Arbiters are meant to die in combat, but Sesa wasn't ready to throw his life away. This is probably the biggest reason for Sesa firing on Thel, especially in the context of Halo 2 alone. Even if Thel was seemingly open to hearing Sesa and Spark out, they simply did not have the time to spend on a conversation. I'll grant, the game doesn't really keep fans reminded of this fact at all times. I've had more than a few conversations on this topic where people have noted they forgot the station was in freefall. So there's something to be said about the game communicating this properly. Still though, one could ask, why couldn't Thel have brought him in? Or to phrase it another way, why couldn't Sesa surrender himself and then talk with Thel while in captivity? Even if Sesa were captured alive, I doubt he'd be allowed to talk on the journey back to High Charity, and he'd most certainly be executed shortly after arriving. Given what he knew and what he was preaching, I doubt he'd even be given a trial like Thel. So, no matter how you slice it, even in the context of Halo 2 alone, there really wasn't an opportunity for Sesa to talk Thel down. This encounter would start Thel on the path towards denouncing the Covenant entirely, but a single encounter wouldn't be enough. It takes the rest of the game for Thel to really cast off the Covenant's beliefs.
Your ignorance already destroyed one of the sacred rings, demon. It shall not harm another.
Now, with the release of Halo 2 Anniversary, we were given additional context on Sesa Refumee's state of mind. Through these terminals, we see Sesa's first meeting with 343 Guilty Spark, and their discussion that leads to Sesa denouncing the Covenant entirely. For one thing, though Sesa immediately cuts communications to any nearby Covenant forces, he isn't immediately convinced of the truth of the Halo rings, only accepting Spark's words after a long conversation. Second, we can see that though Sesa believes that Thel would be one of the few that might accept Spark's words, if he were still alive, he'd either be executed or made an Arbiter. And if Thel were made an Arbiter,
I doubt he would even respond to his former name. I don't know what it would take to overcome, but as you say, we don't have time to ask such questions.
all this really does is reinforce the points we've already discussed, but I think it helps drive the point home. There simply wasn't ample time or opportunity to let Thel listen to Spark and accept the truth. Nevertheless, Sesa did play a key role in the downfall of the Covenant, even if he didn't live to see it. Hopefully this answers any lingering questions about the Heretic Leader, Sesa Refumee, and why he acted how he did in Halo 2. Thank you for watching, stick around for the Patreon shoutout, and until next time, this has been Halo Canon. First, I'd like to give a big thank you to our Haraspis patrons. Hope, the very first, and now Freight, the second. Thank you both for your amazing support of the channel. Next, I'd like to thank our theoretical patrons. If you'd like to see your name here or get a direct shoutout, check out patreon.com/halocanon. You can simply support the channel or get additional benefits, such as behind-the-scenes materials, including the raw audio for videos and peeks at upcoming videos, or even shoutouts like this. All patrons now get early access to certain videos as well, and more benefits are to come. However, your continued viewership is more than enough for me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and maybe even subscribing to the channel if you aren't already. If you really enjoy my content, turn on that notification bell so you can be among the first to see new videos when they release. But for all my fellow Canonites, keep on being awesome.